Hi, Zizaran here with another video for the Dawn of the Hunt patch for Path of Exile, and this is going to be a tips and tricks videos, which is some things that I think will help you have a better start during the campaign and just for new players in general. So Path of Exile 2 is an incredibly hard game and you really want to take advantage of the vendors. Now, the vendors will sell you things for gold, so you will have to balance how often you're disenchanting and selling items. In the start, I am mostly going to be selling items, and I'm not gonna be doing much of like regal crafting or anything early on. So yeah, mostly just want gold for both gambling and buying things off the vendor. Now, when does the vendor reset? And the way that works is every time you level up, it'll remove some items and add some. So if you're feeling particularly weak, you'll notice some people will be actually going to the vendor and checking nearly every time they level. Early on, they'll be checking for, let's say you're a summoner, you'll be checking for plus minion skills, you'll be checking for a good scepter with spirit, etc. And movement speed will be pretty important for everything, but yeah, make sure you check your vendors. And in general, you could get lucky and just pick up a really useful item here. Another thing to look out for is sockets. Early on is going to be very important. Like being able to pick up something like this for 180 gold, and then you get your salvaging bench pretty early by the end of Act 1, and then being able to use Artificer Orbs early on will give you a big up in resistances. And remember that you can swap out runes now, so if you're coming up against a fire resist boss and you have 10 fire res, you can actually put in fire runes over your cold or lightning runes. And it's not just socket things you can buy, you can also search for quality and end up getting armor quality or weapon quality or even like quality on a scepter or something. Obviously the spirit has been removed from quality on scepter, which is a bit of a pain, but it's still going to be useful to get different qualities. Another tool that's going to be very useful during the campaign, but also early mapping, is the Reforging bench. The way this works is you'll put in 3 items of the same rarity, so 3 rares or 3 blues, and it will be rerolled into a completely new item. It is not going to be based on the items you put in at all. The only thing that does matter though is if you are like doing this as you're progressing through the campaign and you're putting in, let's say, a item level 15 scepter and then 245, the item is going to be item level 15. It does not average it out. It takes the lowest item level. So be careful that you're not like mixing with like too low item levels. And in general, just for looking up things, PoEDB2 is really, really useful for this. You can like click modifiers, and then you'll find scepters, for example, if you're going a minion build, and then you look like, what are the thresholds for plus minion skills? So obviously plus 5 is being removed, but you know, a good example would be don't try really, really hard for an upgrade when it's an item level 16 scepter, or try gambling when you're level 15 or level 16. Try to keep these like item level thresholds a little bit in mind when you're going for upgrades. So let's say that I'm level 17 and I'm feeling really weak. Well, by looking up a little bit of stats on items that I care about, maybe I'll realize, well, if I get one more level 18, then the items I'll be finding have a chance to be a whole lot better. So keeping that in mind while leveling is actually very huge. The same goes for whether you should be alching an item, right? Since I know that it's item level 18 for +2, I'm never going to use an alchemy on an item level 17 scepter. And to see the item level, you just hold Alt. Life flasks are incredibly important in PoE 2, and a really good stat that you could look out for, especially if you're playing hardcore, is part of it being instant. It's usually like up to like 25% off the flask being used instantaneously. That'll really, really help you from getting bursted down. And another mod that I really like, particularly during the campaign, is the one you see here with gain charges per second. I found that, like, especially if I'm playing slower, it'll just make sure that my life flask is up all the time with charges. Another thing that's very important as well is to keep upgrading your life flask through the campaign. Once you're able to use the next tier, you really want to swap. If you aren't following a guide that already tells you to do this, make sure you consider using the weapon set points for your build. For example, in this build, which is kind of relevant for the next patch specifically, but the idea is important with, in this build, we're using our second weapon set to buff our curses, for example. So I have loads of curse effect and curse duration, as well as like AoE. So when I then swap and actually cast my curse, it's going to be huge. It is going to be of faster and more effective, and actually gets us a ton more damage. And there's no actual difference in how it affects like my damage points, because in my other weapon set, I've taken loads of damage. So this idea and keeping that in mind for the patch, even if you're just using one damage type, right? So I'm not talking necessarily whether you have a fire spell and a lightning spell and you're using two different weapons. Like, this is great even if all I care about is lightning, because then all my damage nodes are elemental, lightning, and then, yeah, the secondary one's all about effect. Remember that in PoE 2, you cannot change your ascendancies. So while your like base class is already a permanent choice, so is your ascendancy. So keep that in mind before you like ascend and choose it. Cannot respec it. Saving items for recombinators is very likely going to be strong. So if you find an amulet that has one good stat on it, like let's say +3 minion amulet, but maybe otherwise kind of dead, like really bad stats, keeping that for recombinator is going to be very useful. Same with like weapons with like a really high physical damage stat. All of this stuff we're going to be hoarding a lot more, and then using with recombinators, trying to pray for even a strong 2-stat item could be incredibly good in PoE 2. So keep that in mind. Going to be very important for League Start. Now, imagine everything's been nerfed and you feel super weak. How do you actually farm to get some more power in PoE 2? So in Act 1, obviously the first area that you can farm here is the Red Veil. It's got a decent amount of density, but it's also extremely scary monsters. Act 1 just doesn't have the most amazing farming spots the first time around, but we'll talk more about that like on the second come around. And do remember, you get to pick up 10 cold, lightning, and fire resist in the acts. So very, very important. And you can hover over things to see if you have them. Obviously, the Sisters of Garakan, kind of like hidden and hard to see. Now, in the Lost City and the Underground Zone, it's just really, really high density zone. Obviously, this was incredibly good at the launch of Path of Exile because there was a beetle here that you could just sort of respawn at the checkpoint and kill. And there were a few other points like this as well. They've been gone. However, the zone is still incredibly good to just do a reset at the waypoint. Remember that you can hold control to reset at the waypoint and just keep doing this zone over and over again. And every run that you find the beetle, I would just like reset and go again. But really, really good zone just due to its density and like the other side questy things that end up spawning here, like the Golden Tomb. Like, they do have pretty good loot, and as you're about to see, it does spawn a bunch of monsters that will come out to try to get you. So very nice farming zone. I would recommend that in Act 2. And it is less about levels in PoE 2 because the diminishing return starts so fast. So once you're 3 levels above, getting that 4th level is going to be really hard. But it's more about the gear. So a really good rule of thumb for anyone thinking about playing hardcore and stuff, if you're feeling weak, you are. And you probably just want to keep farming in one spot until you're strong. The other spot, the Dreadnought Vanguard, which is very dangerous and rippy. So usually I would farm up a decent amount of levels in the Lost City and then farm up more in the Dreadnought Vanguard. When I was really struggling, I would get to like 36 or 37 here and have decent gear. And then the boss would be pretty trivial. So just remember that that is an option. Act 3, I found that there weren't that many good farming spots. Chimera Wetlands was probably the one I liked the most, but honestly, in general, I hated trying to find really good farm spots in Act 3. The Waterways was probably some of the decent ones because it was kind of higher level and is before dangerous things, like Viper. So, I don't know, I didn't love it. The area after the portal too, right before Viper, is also not terrible. Once you're in Act 1 the second time, farming the Ice Witch is such a good farm spot. Like, she's pretty trivial on all my builds the second go around and drops a lot of good loot. And yeah, you can just respawn at the waypoint. Obviously, you can't use respawn at checkpoint, but you can like just hold control down, go to the waypoint, and go over again. And she's usually always like northeast of the waypoint, so very easy to find. Other than that, same thing with like the Lost City in Act 2, and then Dreadnought again right before the boss. And kind of the same issue with Act 3. I just didn't love anything here. Anyway, I hope these tips and tricks help you for League Start. If you have any additional tips that I didn't think of, please feel free to put them in the comments down below and help other people have a great League Start. Hope you have an amazing league start. Thanks for watching. Sub if you like it, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.